It is time for week 6 wide receiver rankings. Hayden, there is only one man, only one place to start at the top. The guy who's finished as the wide receiver 7, 6, 8, 1, and 7 on the season. That is Puka Nacua at the Baltimore Ravens. A Ravens defense that is playing second and third stringers at numerous spots right now.
Yeah, they still will be too. So the only negative thing you can possibly say is there is weather in this game. There's supposed to be rain and wind. We will update you guys during our live show on Sunday mornings to finalize that. And guess what? I've watched Puka Nacua without gloves in the rain against the Ravens ball out. So pretty rare. At one point during this week, he was up at 100 receiving yards in the pick 'em lobby for the higher lower, which is just doesn't happen very much. It's fallen a little bit because of the weather, but down to 96.5 yards.
Not bad. Next, Amon-Ra St. Brown in a more difficult matchup against the Kansas City Chiefs and Steve Spagnuolo. However, this Chiefs defense, as we have talked about relentlessly, is not close to the defense as they've been in the last few years so far.
Yep. They don't have a pass rush. Chris Jones, I still think looks great, but not like the all-pro version of himself. Most importantly, their secondary just lost safeties and corners. And the thing to note here for Amon-Ra, who largely plays in the slot, Trent McDuffie this season has continued to play on the outside. In theory, he can move back inside for matchup purposes here. But when since they moved him to the outside, the Chiefs, their last year and a half, have been completely shredded against the slot. And that's why, remember back in the Super Bowl, we were all over Devontae Smith hires because he was in the slot and he just had the easier matchup. That's still the case right now. So this is a great spot for Amon-Ra. Even though the team total's down, I think that he's going to have a monster game.
I'm not saying it's wise to eliminate one of, 5 data samples, but if you eliminate Amon-Ra St. Brown or any Lion against the Green Bay Packers in week 1, he and Puka Nacua are both averaging over 22 half PPR points right now over the last 4 games. So they're the wide receiver 1 and 2. And that brings us to the wide receiver 3, also in that time span, also averaging 18 fantasy points per game, who's also the wide receiver 9 in consensus rankings, but your wide receiver 3. This is George Pickens at the Carolina Panthers.
Last week, very difficult matchup. Sauce Gardner did end up traveling even on the inside reps for George Pickens, and he still was able to clear with the touchdown. This is just a much easier spot against the Carolina Panthers. Team total is really high for the Cowboys at about 26.25 points. He's like wide receiver 4 on wide receiver 6 usage this month. That includes a game with CeeDee Lamb. That also includes the Sauce Gardner game. Just a much easier matchup on paper here. I do think that he has monster 2 touchdown potential outcomes. Even when they get down to the red area, they're still throwing him jump balls as well. The offensive line is still beat up for the Cowboys, but they've just been so well coached. Dak Prescott's playing out of his mind right now that this is just a good spot. So up at 72.5 receiving yards in the pick and lobby. And I think he's one of the guys that could have one of these games where it's 130 yards, 2 touchdowns, and runs away with it.
Maybe a more, ambitious, aggressive defense would allow one of the highest paid corners in the league in J.C. Horn to travel with George Pickens, but Ejiro Evero has just never done that with J.C. Horn, and especially in the slot. So maybe that would be different in this game, but I highly doubt it. And George Pickens should once again be the go-to target. And we did see CeeDee Lamb return to individual drills this week, right? So hopefully he's on the ramp up to coming back next week. Jaxon Smith-Njigba is your wide receiver 4. This is at the Jacksonville Jaguars, which makes this a fascinating conversation based on what happened with the Jaguars cornerback room this week. We know that Tyson Campbell has been, honestly, their best corner for multiple years. They signed him to an extension somewhat recently. He was traded midweek to Greg Newsome, who is on just the final year of his contract and has looked decent opposite Denzel Ward. But it's very rare a team plays or trades one of their starting outside corners when 4-1, a guy that is playing every single snap for another guy and saying, okay, now you have to face one of the best wide receivers in the league in JSN.
And it's the same position. I would say it's pretty much the same tier of player. So I think this is all just financials and long-term flexibility for the two teams. I don't know. I didn't make any JSN adjustments here. I did note that, though. It's just wild that this even happened. So he's expected to play here. So the Seahawks team total is a little bit lower than usual, but at 23.25 points is still above average. And JSN he does all the slot stuff if they ever ask him to do. But this year, just an outside downfield threat, which is super impressive. He's just awesome.
I think the trade made a bunch of people assume or guess that maybe Travis Hunter plays more corner. My interpretation was Tyson Campbell's played all the snaps at right cornerback. Greg Newsome's played all of his cornerback snaps on the right side. On the left side, they basically rotated 3 guys.
Yeah.
Monteric Brown, Jerry Jones, and Travis Hunter. So I think that's kind of the area that would still work with here. By the way, JSN, wide receiver 71 in the amount of routes that he's run this season, but he owns nearly 50% of the team's air yards, which is nutso stuff.
Wild. I think it's like at 4.5 yards per route or something ridiculous. It's like
Crazy.
total outlier stuff.
Okay, Drake London off a bye is your wide receiver 5 versus the Buffalo Bills. We talked about in stats versus film that the key for this game, especially against this Bills secondary, is that prior to the bye week, he finally got going. He's had 11 slot targets all season long. 6 were in week 4 before the bye week.
Right. So that's without that wide receiver coach who they're just pointing the finger at, I guess. This also means Darnell Mooney is likely to miss this game with that hamstring injury. So I think all that stuff plays into this aggressive Drake London ranking. So yeah, 14.3 expected points before the bye, which is a season high. 21 points in the actual box score. I actually also like the matchup too. Buffalo's got like a decent outside corner, but I think in general, the defense is just pretty lackluster. So the fact that they're 5.5 point home dogs, and I think that the defense is pretty weak, this is a great opportunity for Drake London. I think he can have 8 for 90, something like that in this one.
Hopefully you all tuned into the trade show that I did with Faraz. It was an interesting week because, after 5 games, a lot of people have expectations fall flat in their face or maybe overproduced by guys like George Pickens and Emeka Egbuka, and they wonder if they should sell high. I bring that up because Emeka Egbuka is next. I'm amazed I got like a dozen questions about, hey, should I trade Emeka Egbuka for XYZ?
Right.
He's been a top 5 scoring wide receiver this season, and here he is wide receiver 6 on the week against the San Francisco 49ers, and no Chris Godwin this week too.
Right. I'm guessing a lot of that's just based hey, Chris Godwin's a big name, Mike Evans a big name. Those guys are going to come back eventually, which, like, first of all, I'm not sure if we're going to see much Chris Godwin the rest of the season. And even if we did, this version of Chris Godwin is just like not the same. I went back and watched him, like the screen target, he had room to run, got tackled immediately, dropped a ball going on the out route. His only catches this last game was like sitting in zone coverage. So it's just not the same player. Also, Emeka has been running very hot down the field, but guess what? He's just super confident with his hands. He's got plenty of athleticism. He's super tough running across the middle. And he's just has this veteran presence, just like head fakes, tempo in his route, all the stuff that you see from Pro Bowl level wide receivers. It's as simple as that. He's just that. He kind of reminds me of JSN, Cooper Kupp, Puka, a young version of Chris Godwin. He's just like this kind of archetype of player. So yeah, great spot. Once again, high team total at 25 points. No Chris Godwin, no Nick Bosa, no Yetur Gross-Matos for the 49ers here. So their pass rush is not going to be as potent. So full faith in Emeka, who can also do stuff in the manufactured touch department if they ever want to get him going there too.
He's been absolutely destroying zone coverage in comparison to man coverage. I'm with you on the Chris Godwin stuff. You can bring that up for Mike Evans at the same time. Isn't this exactly what we hope for, though, when we draft rookies like in the 8th or 9th round in your league, that, they just are doing exactly what Puka Nacua did during the first 5 games of his rookie season? I remember back when that happened. I'm not comparing the two necessarily as talented as players and all this type of stuff, but people were like, oh, sell high, this isn't going to last. And that was Puka as, a mid to late round NFL draft pick. Emeka Egbuka has first round draft capital next to him. Like, why wouldn't this continue? Yeah.
He's the all-time leading receiver at Ohio State. It's as simple as that.
Wide receiver 7 this week is Romeo Odunze at the Washington Commanders. This is an interesting game. I mean, the 2 top quarterbacks in their draft class facing off, and what Romeo Odunze has achieved so far with Caleb Williams this year is dominating in man coverage, and they're off a bye week.
I think the Bears are going to look awesome coming out of the bye. It's a complicated playbook. They were rotating a bunch of players, even including the offensive line. I think they're just going to cut the fat, double down to the stuff that's working, and guess what's been working? Romeo Odunze in the normal dropback game, Caleb Williams in the normal dropback game. Just the confidence is growing for both of them this month. Wide receiver 3 on wide receiver 4 usage. I just think it's going to be a great opportunity. The Commanders secondary is, I think, average. Drake London had a big game. Tre Tucker had that 37-point game against them as outside wide receivers. So just a really good spot for Romeo Odunze. And I think that coming out of the bye week, what would you do? I think it's the same thing I would do. Is just keep throwing the ball to Rome.
Well, on the opposite side of the field, Deebo Samuel faces off against this Bears secondary. In the past, we have always targeted Deebo in zone heavy games. he hasn't been his best historically against man coverage. And look, no team even runs 60% man coverage, right?
Yeah.
But this Chicago team does run a large chunk of their snaps in man coverage, but he's actually doing much better at it this year. As we've seen, true vertical routes, 31 yards in isolated coverage. He's just the focal point of this passing game.
He has no Terry McLaurin in this one. I think Jaden Daniels looked fine last week. So the team total is really high, third most at 27 at home. Bears secondary, they're missing their top outside corner. He's just been placed on injured reserve, hasn't played in a little bit. Kyler Gordon was missing in the slot for the last couple games, and they were getting obliterated against the slot. He's back in this one, but just the fact that Deebo Samuel, I think, is back inside for a higher percentage of his looks, I do think is just allowing him to not face as much press man coverage this year. They're getting creative with them. You can always do the end around and running back stuff with him if they ever get back to that. So he's averaging 13.8 expected half PPR points without Terry McLaurin. That's easily wide receiver one type of stuff, and the team total is really high too.
I mean, over the last 4 weeks, Deebo Samuel is the wide receiver 12 overall in fantasy points per game, and that includes a 3.9er in week 3. Conversation time. Your wide receiver 9, Ja'Marr Chase at the Green Bay Packers. He popped up on the injury report on Friday, questionable with an illness. Same, been that way for a week.
To him.
I did, yes. So far, Ja'Marr Chase has 2 of his 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, and also in fourth quarters, 14.1 yards per target, in comparison to 8.7 yards per target being the highest of any other quarter so far. So what are you expecting the Flacco to Chase connection to look like?
Just in general, Flacco is more willing to throw the ball into tight situations down the field. I think that was the worst part of the Jake Browning experience, was aside from those just brutal interceptions, he would just not take chances. And when you got these two dudes out there, you just got to take some chances. I think Flacco understands the assignment, will allow these guys to make some plays on the ball. So I think it's an upgrade for these two in fantasy, even if it's not much of an upgrade for the team in general. Obviously a terrible spot going into Green Bay, but garbage time is going to be here. They're 14-point dogs, and it takes only a couple plays for Ja'Marr Chase to end up in the end zone on a 50-yarder. So just leaning into that.
Are you banking on garbage time just as much with Joe Flacco as you are with Jake Browning?
I think it's all about the same. I just think that Ja'Marr Chase can have a touchdown in the first quarter too. It's just, that's what happened the last couple of games here, and just keep going back to, you play the Vikings and then you get Pat Surtain in Denver. You're just not, even the Packers secondary is not as difficult as those two matchups. So maybe Joe Flacco said, "Hey, I just played this team. Here's what I would do against."
He did just play the team and throw for 145 yards.
Well, did not have these guys.
No, he did not. That's for sure. Yeah. Flacco, when I would think of him over the last 2 years, my brain would immediately jump back to when he was throwing passes to Amari Cooper on that historically hot run with the Browns.
Yep.
He hasn't looked anything close to that as a player.
Right.
He was making things happen with his feet. He was throwing laser beams down the field. They were winning in tight coverage. To me, he's been really inaccurate on his downfield throws ever since then. Obviously, last year, the stuff with the Colts was horrific, and we've seen what the Colts look like with Daniel Jones at quarterback this year. And then, his stuff with the Browns wasn't any better. So it can definitely happen. I expect him to get the football out quickly and speed outs, and has so much more experience under his belt than Jake Browning. I would definitely hope for just more stable production over the first 3 quarters than truly just banking on terrible garbage time performances, and for that to happen, because you only get to garbage time because you've been so bad for 3 quarters.
Right. I still think he can score a touchdown in the first quarter, though. Also, 63.5 receiving yards in the pick and lobby. If you disagree with my rankings, hit a lower. It's there.
The interesting part of that too is 9.5 first quarter receiving yards for him, 27.5 first half receiving yards here for Ja'Marr Chase in the pick and lobby. As always, if you want to support us, the best way of doing that is to go and play on Underdog. We are in 41 of 50 states now. So if previously 2 or 3 years ago, you would watch the show and you couldn't draft, or you couldn't play pick'em or prediction markets or sports books, champions, now you can probably in your state. So click link in the description down below, use promo code the show, play $5 for the first time, and you get $100. Xavier Worthy, your wide receiver 10 versus the Detroit Lions. he actually saw his route participation bump up another week out from this injury that will last the entire season. He went from like 70% of dropbacks to 80% of dropbacks, and he's already had about 22% of the target. So I think we've kind of found Xavier Worthy's involvement here in what the Chiefs are going to be for this week. And then pretty soon they'll get Rashid Rice back.
Right. But for this week, just great spot without Rashid Rice. The last 2 games, he's been the wide receiver 9 in usage. They give him some manufactured stuff, which is like why he kind of turned that ankle. But also he's getting some downfield reps, which eventually this will turn into a downfield touchdown. You know, like the one in the Super Bowl does still count. It's possible that he can have one in the regular season. At least I'm hoping so. The matchup could not get better right now. So you're at home. The Chiefs have the second highest team total of the week. I think the Chiefs offense looks great. Their offensive line is better. The fact that Xavier Worthy is healthy again is obviously improving. And even like Tyquan Thornton is an upgrade over the other ones. But the Lions secondary right now, DJ Reed is out. Terrion Arnold is out. Ennis Rankstraw has been out. That's like their 3 top options on the perimeter. So it's just going to be a good spot for Xavier Worthy against a lot of backups. I know they still have Brian Branch and a good pass rush, but the secondary right now is just super banged up. Even like Kirby Joseph, their safety, he's been on the injury report. Linebackers on the injury report. So this is not the same like stud Lions defense. It's kind of like the version of the Lions defense late last year where they just had too many starters on the injury report.
Yeah, Worthy had been on the injury report this week too, but Andy Reid said that he was at practice and, quote, moved around good. So I would assume that Xavier Worthy plays here in week 6. That brings us to Jaylen Waddle versus the LA Chargers, who also made a trade this week. Chargers failing to generate a good amount of pass rush without Khalil Mack on the roster. And if Tua has some time, or even if he doesn't, Jaylen Waddle is clearly, other than Darren Waller, their best downfield asset right now. And he hit a bomb touchdown last week too.
He looks great. He just ran by everybody. But on top of that, there was a couple nice out routes, in routes as well. So I think he's still the same dude that he's always been. Now he's just going to get the target. So he's up to 28% targets per route without Tyreek Hill on the field. Last week was a season high in usage. And remember, back as a rookie, he was a Pro Bowl level wide receiver, a top 15 fantasy wide receiver that season. And that was without Tyreek Hill as a rookie. So this is a difficult matchup. Certainly the Chargers just are trying to remove the explosive play. But I also think that they just can't run the ball in Miami right now. And Jaylen Waddle, I think, is going to be a solution on like underneath routes. So it'd be a little bit harder for Waddle to have that 100 yards and a touchdown game, but I would be pretty surprised if he leaves without like 8 targets in this one.
This episode is brought to you by Square, because your favorite neighborhood spots run on Square. And by that, I mean, when you're walking at the end of your street, maybe it's a Saturday morning, you just completed a couple chores and boom, you smell that cinnamon roll from the bakery, the patisserie that you're just craving, or your wife stopping home at the end of a workday gets that maple latte that she's been wanting all day long. Heck, it's football season, football weather right now. The place you go to for your favorite wings, or with a buddy that you're both grown up and you're mid-30s and have kids and you just want to get out of the house for an hour and grab a beer or two. That's what the neighborhood is all about. I mean, money spent in the neighborhood stays in the neighborhood. And when we show up as a community, it can be big business for local business owners. You can go to square.com/the show to learn more. But before you do, go support your favorite neighborhood spot. You'll be happy that you did. Square, see you in the neighborhood. So Puka Nacua was your wide receiver 1 on the week. Davante Adams is your wide receiver 12 on the week. Puka scored some red zone touchdowns this year. Davante's are on the way. He has 9 end zone targets, second most in the league. A league high 69% of the team's end zone targets. And again, this is the Ravens defense. So we might want to hit, some Davante Adams anytime touchdown stuff here.
I can see it right now. Puka's number 1 in wide receiver usage this month. Davante Adams is second. So I moved Davante Adams down a little bit just because if we are going to get rain and wind, I think that impacts him more just because he just gets more downfield looks against man coverage than Puka, who you can just funnel the ball to underneath. But still love the spot. Team total is really high. I really don't have much bad to say about Davante Adams. Just dinged him down because of weather a little bit, but we'll follow up with that on Sunday morning.
Well, let's continue with the old men theme. Stefon Diggs, one of our best calls over the last 2 weeks has been the emergence of Stefon Diggs in this offense. You're quite higher than him than the other experts. Wide receiver 17 in consensus rankings. Again, been heavily involved over the last 2 games, and it's great to see because he's playing well, and Drake May is playing well, and he gets a Saints defense, which is still very competitive at this point. But, it's a team that is struggling overall.
Agree on all those points. Last 2 weeks, wide receiver 8 on wide receiver 7 usage. I don't think that you can go away from it. He looks great, and the other wide receivers have no juice, and they were desperate for a wide receiver to step up. For the first 3 weeks, it was all tight ends and running backs. And even with that, they were still running a very successful offense. I think Josh McDaniels has been awesome. Drake May has obviously been very good and just, making better decisions. Accuracy is up a little bit as well. And Steph Diggs is beating man coverage down the field and obviously has a great feel for zone coverage for, playing for a full decade. My note on the Saints, though, 2 starters are still most likely out, Chase Young and Isaac Yiadom at corner. They run a very static defense. Like Brandon Staley's just quarters, sit there, sit there, sit there, sit there, sit there. Do you think Josh McDaniels might have, the blueprint to beat this defense? I think so. And I think it could just be a bunch of little quick outs, quick out, and now they're in the end zone.
Yeah, it's the same stuff all the time. It's giving him some soft coverage and then just not allowing big plays, but Stefon Diggs can feast underneath that. That's for sure. I mean, the offense is being funneled to Stefon Diggs and Hunter Henry, and we've gotten rid of the Pop Douglas stuff, which I'm fine with. And even the early Kayshon Boutte stuff that went from last season into this season has almost vanished in terms of downfield shots. So it's a very centralized passing. Next is Tetairoa McMillan against the Dallas Cowboys as your wide receiver 14. Hayden, whatever content I consume in the fantasy football landscape, all they can talk about is that this is a smash spot for the Carolina Panthers against a woeful Dallas Cowboys defense. Truly, what could go wrong?
Right. And no right tackle, too. So I think we'll get into the weeds with that on our quarterback ranking show on Saturday. But yeah, this is just, Tetairoa looks awesome. He's wide receiver 12 in usage. He has not scored touchdowns. Obviously,
that's it. He just has to score a touchdown in order to eclipse this 13, 12 fantasy points territory that he's operating in.
Right. And I get it. It's the Panthers. They don't score a lot of touchdowns. But this week, they're expected to score 23.5 points, which is above average on the week. The Cowboys, they've been lit up by Malik Neighbors, got him for 33 half PPR. Romeo Doubs got him for 27. Garrett Wilson got him for 16. Romeo Doubs got him for 14. Other secondary wide receivers have gone off too. So they just have struggled against perimeter wide receivers who can win down the field and at the catch point. Trevon Diggs just is not the same player coming off injury. Deron Bland's not even going to see Tetairoa McMillan. They don't have a good pass rush right now. So this is the week. I've said that before though, but I really do feel like this is the one.
But it's not like it's ever been bad for T.
Yeah, exactly.
On the field, he always looks good. It's just not getting the end zone target, not getting a touchdown. And again, the Panthers have also not been bad inside the red zone. They are 10th in red zone touchdown success rate. So I get wanting to throw your massive volleyball wide receiver, the football in tight fields, but it's also working what they're doing right now too. Okay. Brian Thomas Jr. is wide receiver 15 at the Seattle Seahawks. Still wide receiver 19 in target share across the league. Again, people want to get upset about his usage and everything. The usage has really not been a problem. I will say, Hayden, the usage is quite different than what we saw last season when it was downfield shots, big plays, whereas Liam Cohen does not incorporate so far 20 plus yard targets into his offense with Jacksonville. And he didn't do that last year with Tampa Bay. And then at the same time, the screens are going to De'Ami Brown, Travis Hunter, Brenton Strange, and the running backs, and not Brian Thomas Jr.
Right. I do think that Strange injury does matter a lot. I felt like he was the first read on a lot of plays over the middle because he was very trusted. They're going to have to find somebody else to step up. I would guess that's going to be Brian Thomas. I also noticed more out routes for Brian Thomas this last week. So instead of working over the middle, and then also he did have some downfield opportunities, caught one of them, drew 2 different defensive pass interferences. One of them was a slot fade route. So you're not getting the screens per se, but I do think they are manufacturing touches for Brian Thomas. Like we talked about that, 3rd and 14 screen where it was it was still a couple yards down the field. But it was largely a screen. So I think bigger days are coming. I thought those defensive pass interference reps were very good. The one that came down to the sideline. He also just catch and run anything over the middle eventually too. So good news. Devon Witherspoon, slot corner for the Seahawks, probably not going to play. Same thing with free safety Julian Love. So we'll have to make sure on the final injury reports, but those guys have not practiced. And that's a big deal. Seahawks secondary last week got decimated by Baker Mayfield and the Bucs.
We're not going to talk about Travis Hunter because he's not in your top 40 wide receivers. Just a couple details and notes on him, though. Okay. For one, Seahawks on offense run a ton of just 2 wide receiver sets. You know, it could be multiple tight ends. They can include a fullback or a fullback tight end hybrid, whatever. Clint Kubiak loves to do that. Mm-hmm. If that's the case, Travis Hunter might not have as many opportunities to play actual defense in this game, right?
Yeah.
Because they're going to run base defense more. Well, not going to run nickel or dime as much as they are versus other teams, just based on the personnel groupings that Seattle puts out there. So there's one thing. So maybe that means more offensive snaps on top of this.
I like it. Okay.
And at the same time, no Brenton Strange means potentially fewer 12 personnel snaps on offense as well. It's Hunter Long and who else are the tight ends there, right? Michael Hoyt? No, he was a former outside pass rusher. There's someone else that they signed from the Rams.
I picked him up in some Sicko Dynasty League.
Okay, well, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Anyways, without their best tight end, maybe fewer multiple tight end sets, which also means maybe more 11 personnel, 3 wide receiver sets. So
yeah,
I don't want to overreact to, Travis Hunter looking awesome the last 2 weeks in terms of big downfield catches. But all I'm seeing in the pick'em lobby is just 3.5 receptions and 36.5 receiving yards. So if Travis Hunter has fewer opportunities on defense and they have to play more 3 wide receiver sets on offense, this could be a real nice Travis Hunter week on offense. Just saying.
I really like that. I will see you guys in the pick'em lobby. I believe it's Johnny Munt just came to
yes.
my brain. Munt and Hunter Long. Boom.
I mean, Michael Hoyt, Johnny Munt.
Yeah. Munt is like the most tight end name ever. Munt.
And those guys are true blocking tight ends. Okay. Michael Pittman Jr. is next as wide receiver 16. When we talk about quarterbacks on Saturday, Daniel Jones is ranked quite high for you. So it's no surprise here that Michael Pittman Jr. is top 16.
Well, every single stat the Colts put out there, they're quite high. So I'm just fully believing in this one. They're right up there in projected points at 27 at home against the Cardinals. We'll see if Will Johnson plays, still limited with a groin injury. They have another corner on injured reserve. So I think it's a good matchup for Michael Pittman in general. The Cardinals have allowed 11 half PPR points to opponent outside wide receiver ones in 4 straight games, which is pretty hard to do. So I think it's just a good matchup for Michael Pittman. He gets a couple extra RPO targets in this one. I think that Daniel Jones is more comfortable throwing the ball over the middle of the field than the other wide receiver or the other quarterbacks they've had recently. So he's like flirting with like 100 catch pace over the last 20 healthy games. So I think he's an underrated fantasy asset right now.
QJ, Quentin Johnston, is the top, just barely, of the Chargers wide receivers in your rankings. I was throwing them on the board right now because we'll talk about them in a moment. Ladd McConkey's at wide receiver 20, excuse me. And then Keenan Allen is wide receiver 21. So it's 3 in a 5 wide receiver span. Just talk us through this wide receiver room and how you see it right now.
So with Quentin Johnston, he's on the injury report with a hamstring injury. So got to make sure that irons itself out. But the offensive line situation is so bad. Jamari Salyer and Trey Pipkins are also on the injury report. So it's not even just the 2, tackles. So I think there's going to be probably fewer downfield opportunities for Quentin Johnston on the whole. That said, he's just been the most productive and most utilized wide receiver on the team. And the Dolphins secondary is so pathetic. You can talk about that on the inside or on the outside. For McConkey and Keenan, they have so many slot corners that have been released or on injured reserve that they're going to play like legitimate safeties at slot corner this game. So I just really like those 2 guys matchups as well. All these guys can eat, and I'm hoping that they get the ball out quickly. I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball with their running back group and offensive line. So I'm expecting probably a lot quick hitting passes. So I do think that this could be a better spot than we've seen from Ladd McConkey and Keenan Allen. But yeah, Quentin Johnston's just still number 1 in all the usage metrics.
Garrett Wilson is your wide receiver 18. This is against the Denver Broncos. Kind of the same as the Jamar Chase stats here. Garrett Wilson has 3 of his 4 touchdowns in the 4th quarter. I'll bring the stat up again from the Great Rich Rebar during the quarterbacks episode. But over the past 2 weeks, Justin Fields has been the quarterback 21 in scoring per game through the first 3 quarters, and then the highest scoring fantasy quarterback in the fourth quarter. And let me remind you that they're 0-5 right now. Garbage time.
This is a difficult one because the production and usage has been there for Garrett Wilson the entire season. Like, didn't really matter which quarterback. Now it's obviously a little bit hard to trust because of just the quarterback situation. But on top of that, it's also Patrick Surtain week, and outside wide receiver ones against Surtain. Calvin Ridley under 5 points. Michael Pittman 6 points. Quentin Johnston, the best receiver in the league, held to only 11.9. Jamar Chase under 5. A.G. Brown under 7. So, and I've also watched in key situations the Broncos, because they play a lot of man coverage, will also shade a safety over the top too. So you can just get, and obviously you would do that against Garrett Wilson because the drop down is pretty substantial. So this is actually probably a lot of faith in Garrett Wilson, because I think the matchup and the team total and everything, it's pretty much as bad as it gets. But they really have so few options that they're going to have to throw it up to him no matter what.
The Jamar Chase mention there makes a ton of sense to me, because it's like Chase versus the Broncos in garbage time versus Chase versus the Lions in garbage time, right?
Where you
like
can actually do
the
it.
Broncos have good enough defense to continue that for 4 quarters, even if they shut you down for the first 3 and not necessarily take the pedal off the gas in terms of being a quality unit for 60 minutes versus, you know, the Lions, when you also have injuries at corners, then you can have, you know, an explosion in a single quarter. So it's tougher when you're facing better defenses to score in garbage time when you've been bad for 4 quarters.
Yeah. I mean, Pat Surtain literally plays man coverage and he's the best in the world. So it's tough.
Courtland Sutton, wide receiver 19 at the New York Jets, on the opposite side of this one. He was my name this week that people should go out there and target in their leagues, just because I think this might be the time that, obviously he is the alpha of that wide receiver group, but that Sean Payton and Bo Nix figure it out, per se, the rest of the way. And he is a mainstay for them.
I like that call a lot. Bo Nix has struggled, but he's struggled in September, then went crazy later on. Yeah, he just, when he was just catching all those passes against Quinjon Mitchell, it's just a reminder. It's difficult to guard Courtland Sutton. Even when you have him like in your hip pocket, he just mosses you. So that's what's going to happen here. This is not an easy matchup. Once again, Sauce Gardner has been traveling with opposing wide receiver ones. I think that he will travel with Courtland Sutton. They will be right next to each other on these back shoulder fades and post routes and whatnot. So Courtland Sutton's so much bigger than Sauce, who's more of a lighter, longer corner. So hopefully he can kind of just bully him. George Pickens was able to go up and catch a long one against him. So difficult matchup for him. But he's been a wide receiver too for years now, and he's at 64.5 receiving yards in the pick'em lobby.
Jauan Jennings is the first 49ers wide receiver on this list. It sounds like he will play this week after practicing on a somewhat limited basis so far. Mac Jones is his quarterback. This is against the Buccaneers. We'll talk about it in the quarterback show, but I mean, Todd Bowles blitzed the hell out of Brock Purdy last year, and I'm sure Todd Bowles is going to blitz the hell out of Mac Jones, and that's going to leave Jauan Jennings in some isolated situations.
So for my rankings, I got Jauan Jennings obviously in, Ricky Pearsall and George Kittle out. So this is just a good spot for Jauan Jennings. Whenever he's had this type of, personnel grouping, he's been balling out. Remember, like, he was a borderline fantasy wide receiver one, like, during this iteration. I think Mac Jones is doing a good enough Brock Purdy impersonation right now. So I think that they have a lot of faith in the offense. So like you said, I think it should be a lot of one-on-one opportunities. It's just a pass funnel defense because their run defense is so dominant. And right now, the Buccaneers have a couple corners who are banged up. So they're playing like a rookie on the outside when he should be a nickel. And I would like that matchup if Jauan Jennings sees Jacob Parrish. So there's a really good spot. I think an underrated spot. I'm really hoping to get a full participation, but he's also somebody that just plays through injuries, ribs, ankle. You don't even know what it is, but Jauan Jennings, a total alpha.
What percent of you considered placing Kendrick Bourne as the 49ers wide receiver one?
Not too high, but I do think he's playable. He's definitely playable.
Okay. Romeo Doubs is your biggest onion hanger of the week. He's wide receiver 33 in consensus rankings and wide receiver 23 for you against the Cincinnati Bengals secondary. Because they had a bye week, I feel like people kind of forgot what Romeo Doubs did prior to the bye in terms of, dominating on the most important targets, which were downfield and in the red zone.
I think it's because he wasn't like a great prospect, and it's like taken some years and he had some key drops and primetime stuff. So people don't want to give him credit. he's just gotten better every single year, and he plays full-time snaps, and the Packers are first in team total at 29 against the Bengals, who still don't have Shamar Stewart. So, I mean, this is just a massive spot. How many games has Romeo Doubs had multiple touchdowns? You know, like, it seems like he's like the underrated guy in that metric. Christian Watson's going to be a week away. Obviously, Jaden Reed's out still a couple more months, most likely. So it's your time to get after Romeo Doubs. And I have a aggressive Matthew Golden ranking, I'm sure, but Romeo Doubs just does not come off the field. And in the red area, he's just a bigger target, and they trust him on these like kind of skinny posts and slants, and even some back shoulder fits.
Jakobi Meyers, cover your ears, ladies and gentlemen, still listed here as wide receiver 24. Hayden, after 2 weeks of, well, if it doesn't happen this week, it's not going to happen. It's the third one going to happen.
Well, I hope. I mean, we'll see. I say that for content, but then you get into the rankings and you're like, okay, well, Brock Bowers is still out. The team total's at 23, so it's above average. They're at home. The Titans haven't stopped anybody, specifically wide receiver ones. They have at least double-digit points in all 5 games against the Titans. That's Courtland Sutton, Puka Nacua, Michael Pittman, Nico Collins, Marvin Harrison, different types of profiles there. And yeah, like, they haven't been able to run the ball, so I think you're going to take some shot passes. Geno Smith's been playing bad, throwing interceptions, but he at least still moves the football with yards enough. So he's a wide receiver 25 in usage. I know Jakobi Meyers is a good football player, and I'm hoping Geno Smith, plays a little bit better.
He's got to block better, and then Geno does have to play better. You would like to think if there was one team that Geno doesn't throw crippling interceptions against and doesn't skip reads against, it's this Tennessee Titans defense. You would like to think.
I will say this. Geno Smith in real life has been dreadful. You have 9 interceptions. For fantasy, Geno Smith is 11th in passing yards, so it could be worse. A back-breaking pick 6 in the first quarter is good news for Jakobi Meyers.
Okay.
It is. It's proven.
Well, I don't know. So far, we've seen if Geno throws 1 interception, he's throwing 2, and then sometimes he's also throwing 3.
It does happen. It happens to the best of us.
Okay, on this Mr. Consistency train, Calvin Ridley's next as wide receiver 25 on the opposite end. Just when everyone was out, he pulled you back in with his performance against the Arizona Cardinals.
It was a pretty nice performance, though. Season high in usage, actually was catching the ball. It was a wonky game, but they've at least allowed one wide receiver each week to reach 12.4 half PPR points. When I'm just like watching the Raiders, they play a lot of zone coverage. You let me know when you ever see somebody even in the area code of the guy catching the football. It just seems like they are so far away from everybody against zone. They're just struggling. Point blank period. There's coverage bust. They're just not very fast. It's Max Crosby only. And the Titans are getting JC Latham back, it sounds like, this week, which is good timing.
Chris Olave, wide receiver 26. He played well last week, even if Rashid Shaheed outscored him. Now we get the New England Patriots. I wonder if Christian Gonzalez is going to shadow either one of them, or if he's just going to play to one side of the field.
Yeah, he might have to shadow Rashid Shaheed, who's a total monster. Right. This is, I think, a pretty bad spot in general. Christian Gonzalez is really good. The Patriots haven't allowed a fantasy wide receiver to hit 11 fantasy points in the last 3 weeks. So that's pretty impressive. That's when Christian Gonzalez was back out there. So we're chasing these spreadsheet points from Chris Olave. He's the wide receiver 5 in usage, wide receiver 30 in actual points.
Do you think Pop Douglas looks across and he's like, man, I'm so jealous of Chris Olave this year?
Probably. He should be. He should be.
One light PPR scam to the best PPR scam of all time, which is Chris Olave. Marvin Harrison Jr. is wide receiver 27. Kyler Murray did practice on a limited basis here on Friday, but Kyler Murray, while practicing, is throwing to backup offensive players, and Jacoby Brissett is taking all of the starter wide receiver snaps. So while you might see a different designation than we've seen recently for Kyler Murray, I would highly doubt Jacoby is not starting here if he is throwing to the starting pass catchers.
I just know this. I do not want limited Kyler Murray out there. If it's foot sprain Kyler Murray, that's going to be a problem. I think that Jakobi Meyers or Jacoby Brissett is totally fine for Marvin Harrison. He might actually throw the ball over the middle. Who knows? The team total is really bad. It's under 20 points. So that works against Marvin Harrison. I think Marvin Harrison's making more contested catch plays. They got him like a couple of screens. They move him into the slot a little bit more, but to me, it's still largely just like not a true burner. on tape, and I think that just always kind of holds him back. So this is about where he's been performing on a week-to-week basis. The Colts secondary, will mention, they have a corner who just retired in the middle of the season. So what does that mean for his backup? So there's some pros and cons to the Marvin Harrison profile, the matchup, everything. You throw him in as a wide receiver 3, call him boom bust, and you keep it moving.
I've considered retiring mid-show over the last week while I'm dealing with this sickness that feels like is never going to depart my body.
Mm-hmm.
DK Metcalf is next against the Cleveland Browns. He's also coming off a bye. Aaron Rodgers has turned him to an underneath pass catcher, and he has to break a tackle in order to go 70 yards. It's just not really meshing, even if statistically and as a fantasy producer, DK Metcalf continues to be up there. It just feels like to me, maybe that I'm wrong, and I'm wrong about one of these like every single year, that at some point the production is going to match the actual usage and come down way, way, way lower than it is at this moment. So maybe it's starting this week with DK as wide receiver 28.
It's one of those situations, happens every single year just because small sample size, where it seems like I'm the hater, where it's like, hey, I don't think that his usage is very good. He has a good game, and I just keep saying the same thing. But on top of the usage concerns, which he's the wide receiver 55 in usage, his ADOT is way down. There's some pros to that because Aaron Rodgers like checking into like quick slants and some bubble screens,
especially
DK Metcalf. And he's going to need that because this guy named Myles Garrett's in town, and Aaron Rodgers does not want to get hit. Everyone can accept that. So the ball is going to come out quickly, and Denzel Ward is out there. And I wouldn't be surprised if Denzel Ward shadows DK Metcalf here, just because it's a brand new corner opposite because of that trade. And it would just make sense that you would just throw the ball or put Denzel Ward on DK Metcalf. Also noting, though, Calvin Austin's on the injury report. If he misses, that does kind of matter because Calvin Austin's like a pretty big part of this offense in general. So just a bad spot, just because it's Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward.
Yes or no, does Aaron Rodgers have the shortest, quickest time to throw of any game so far this season here in week 6 of any quarterback?
Yeah. I mean, I did say, to be fair to the haters out there, I was saying this against the Vikings when DK Metcalf.
Troy Franklin, right next to DK Metcalf, is here as wide receiver 29. Talk to me, because he, as we talked about in stats versus film, I believe has like the second highest rate of targets inside of the red zone for any team out there.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then also involved in the screen game, the RPO game as well. He's as close as like a full-time player as Sean Payton will have for their wide receiver 2 in this offense. Just a really good spot because Sauce Gardner is going to be, I think, most likely shadowing Courtland Sutton. There's a big drop off to the next corner, and the data also shows that too. It's just not an eye test thing. Here's what like the secondary wide receivers have done to the Jets. Ryan Flournoy, 15 fantasy points. All 3 Buck wide receivers scored at least double-digit points. Elijah Moore had double-digit points. Calvin Austin had 15. So like those are the same tier of player as Troy Franklin. Those guys have been like studs. Broncos 25.5 point team total. So if Sauce is on Courtland Sutton, like this is as high as I'll have Troy Franklin. And I'm not even a big Troy Franklin guy, but this is just like a beautiful spot for him.
Arguably our first post-bye rookie bump of the season. That nod goes to Matthew Golden. Come on, Matthew. It's the Cincinnati Bengals. Get the usage right. Hit one of those downfield targets. Make us look smarter than we have in the first 5 weeks of the season.
As we say with rookies, sometimes it takes a minute here, and I'm hoping coming out of the bye week, he plays more than the 70% routes that he ran in week 4. The week before that, it was like closer to 90%. So like, let's get into 90% routes. Let's also not just making him a boom bust downfield threat, cheat motion, screen game, do the Jaden Reed stuff with Matthew Golden. He's capable of doing that. It's a great spot against the Bengals. The highest team total of at 29 points for the Packers. Packers also getting some offensive linemen back, it sounds like. Might also lose their left tackle at the same time, but just a beautiful spot for Matthew Golden, who in a different world has 290 yards and 3 touchdowns, but not in this world.
Tre Tucker, sometimes the Raiders wide receiver 1, maybe this week, but ranked later than Jakobi Meyers, but here he stands as wide receiver 31. It's a bit of a roller coaster. I think he's the off-on, and this would be one of the on weeks.
I hope. Yeah. Once again, no Brock Bowers, above average team total. Titans can't stop anybody. He's a wide receiver 17 and wide receiver 28 usage this month. Obviously, a lot of that was buoyed by that one crazy game. But even last week, 25% target share before garbage time ensued. He got a underneath look as well. So I feel like he's just a little bit better than people give him credit for. And maybe not quite as good as like Darnell Mooney was showing on tape last year, but I think the situations are fairly similar, and this is where Darnell Mooney kind of evened out.
Rashid Shaheed, your favorite wide receiver in the NFL, faces off against that same New England Patriots secondary. Last week, we saw the out and up, the vertical route, the double move, touchdown. No one can stay with him. Vroom, vroom. Could we get another?
Yeah, I was going to call him a mini Tank Dell, but he's bigger than Tank Dell. It's hard to get minier, but it's like basically the same exact profile. Just once again, the Patriots defense has been pretty good. We'll see if Christian Gonzalez shadows Chris Olave. It could just be a situation where Rashid Shaheed sees some Christian Gonzalez. Sometimes that's on Chris Olave. I think that's probably the most likely scenario. I did want to note Shaheed's in the slot in 42% of his routes. So that would mean that he would probably see less of Christian Gonzalez. And I think Olave and Shaheed are, not that far apart in terms of their tape. I think that's how good Shaheed is.
Next up is DJ Moore at the Washington Commanders, wide receiver 33. I think he's looked more bought in to the wide receiver position and just his team so far this year. But obviously his production, even his usage, is way down in comparison to Romeo Doubs.
He's turning into more manufacturing, which I think is probably good for him. I think there's more yards after the catch opportunities in this offense where he's not the boom bust down the field option. Get him into the backfield, treat him a little bit like a version of Deebo Samuel. Luther Burden is a post by rookie bump candidate. I would be pretty surprised if that meant like supplanting DJ Moore. I think it would be a win if Luther Burden's just like the third wide receiver in 3 wide receiver sets. So we'll see what this offense looks like. I think it's ripe for some new wrinkles to it just because they have so many rookies coming in. But I would just be pretty surprised if that meant like a big downgrade for DJ Moore.
What if Ben Johnson just goes totally crazy and is like, you know what? We're going to incorporate Luther Burden into wide receiver sets and have DJ Moore as our starting running back. Just have some fun.
I've thought about that. I've thought about it.
Khalil Shakir is here as your wide receiver 34 at the Atlanta Falcons. A Falcons defense also coming off a bye, but we know this Bills offense was really shut down in many ways this past week against the Patriots. And Shakir could help them get it jump started. He's the only Bills wide receiver on your top 40.
I just wanted to mention last year he was kind of in this wide receiver 30s-ish range, especially in full PPR. And then he had that injury in training camp. So would it be surprising if his October looks a lot better than his September? I think it's possible. So fully healthy, has looked good the last couple of weeks, had that crazy touchdown a couple of weeks ago, just reliable presence here. I will note Dalton Kincaid's he's just turned into a very good receiver, so that I think does come at the expense of Khalil Shakir because he's a win in pretty similar parts of the field.
Hollywood Brown also plays for the Chiefs for now. He's facing off.
His snaps are going to get reduced. I can promise you that, if that's what you're implying.
What a week one Hollywood Brown had, and then ever since he exists. I mean, Tyquan Thornton is more impactful than Hollywood Brown for this team.
I agree.
Let's be real.
I agree. The snaps right now, Marquise does play a little bit more, and Marquise scores a touchdown here and there. Once again, if you like Tyquan Thornton over Marquise Brown, it's very similar arguments. Once again, Lions just down their top 3 outside corners. Their safety might not play. They're missing a linebacker. Chiefs second in team total this week. So I think you can do worse than just say, I'm watching this Chiefs Lions game and I'm plugging in one of these wide receivers into it.
So we saw Josh Downs stick in 3 wide receiver sets last week, despite Alec Pierce being out and Adonai Mitchell being benched. And despite all of that and being correct in that assumption, he still had his best week statistically of the season. So Josh Downs here is in the mid-30s for you.
Yeah. This year's Jaden Reed, this year's Josh Downs is Josh Downs himself.
Who could have imagined? T. Higgins is next. Anything you want to add about T that we didn't talk about with Jamar Chase?
I think there's just times where Jake Browning was not throwing the ball to T. Higgins when he could have. And I think Joe Flacco will give him opportunities. It's still the lowest team total of the week. So I don't want to get too crazy here. Obviously the Bengals are going to be pretty down there, but you're going into Green Bay. So I just want to be cognizant of that, where even if I have more optimism long-term, does that mean it's going to happen this week? We shall see.
Right. It should really open up after this week if it is going to open up. I'll say this. T. Higgins also didn't come down with some contested targets that he should have with Jake Browning. That is kind of where T is the high variance nature to him. Those 50-50 opportunities are 50-50 opportunities. Next is Zay Flowers against the Rams. An interesting one here, I think, because, Hayden, dare I say this might be an under the radar Zay Flowers game? The Rams have been getting torched by top pass catchers this year. A.J. Brown went off. Kendrick Bourne went off against them. Devontae Smith had a great game. Michael Pittman, 5 for 50, 41-1. We know Adonai Mitchell had 3 for 96. Zay Flowers last week put Derek Stingley in the mud on a nice double move down the sideline, had a nice long catch. I'm not saying like the series consistency is going to be there and the Rams should dominate the Baltimore Ravens here. But after like a really nice start to the season, I feel like Zay Flowers, rightfully so, has been forgotten. Just from a secondary perspective and having to throw the ball perspective, I think he might have a chance this week.
Okay. He is a difficult ranking for me. Just wanted to zoom back out from last December through this year. He's about the wide receiver 40. And that was with Lamar playing like at a pretty much like an MVP level. Now, you could sell me that the fourth quarter production increase because of game script is actually okay for Zay Flowers, and that his, fantasy production doesn't take that big of a hit without Lamar. But on top of that, we have the weather concerns. So it's rain and wind. We'll see about that. And the team total's down to 18.5. So last week I thought was like kind of what you're hoping for Zay Flowers, where makes enough plays. He's a good receiver. Probably like long odds of scoring a touchdown just because, that's just how it goes in this offense. But could he have 6 for 60? I think it is possible. So he's at 54.5 receiving yards in the pick 'em lobby. He's actually a little bit higher than someone like T. Higgins and Josh Downs and whatnot.
Hollywood Brown.
Yeah, but I mean, Hollywood Brown plays for a team that's projected for 10 more points. That's the hard part.
Okay, Jameson Williams. We talked about in Stats versus Film constantly that last season Ben Johnston utilized him closer to the line of scrimmage. 14.3% of his targets last year were 20-plus yards. This year, that's at 43%.
Right.
So it just goes in the high variance nature of it. And if Jared Goff is inaccurate on those, or what has happened more so far, Jameson Williams just drops that target, then he's not going to get there. It's that simple.
Yeah, the team just more run heavy this year, 31st in neutral pass rate, and Sam Laporta is healthy. And I think, like you keep mentioning, those two guys, when you're the clear secondary parts of the offense or even tertiary parts of the offense, only one of those guys can get home. So I think fewer first read targets, fewer underneath routes. And that just means that this big wheel that we keep spinning, you might have to spin it a couple extra times before it actually hits. So one game, he will have a top 10 fantasy performance, and I hope that you play him in that one. I cannot predict when this is going to happen. You shouldn't have confidence on when it's going to happen either. In theory, he's going to see some Trent McDuffie if he continues to play on the outside, which is the most difficult spot out of anybody on the team.
Okay, last one, Sterling Shepard. No Chris Godwin. So Sterling Shepard's going to be out there in both 2 and 3 wide receiver sets for the Bucs.
I think he's been playing pretty well, like old reliable into the slot. Can play in and outside in 2 wide receiver sets when they do that. Yeah, he's seen it all, and this is an offense that asks a lot for their players, and I think that he can just handle it. And Baker Mayfield's been playing well. Tampa Bay's still really high, been team total at 25. So you can do worse than Sterling Shepard. In fact, I believe I'm going to be picking him up and immediately starting him in a league.
Could I throw out another name?
Yes.
Ryan Flournoy.
Flournoy, I knew it. I have Flournoy ranked inside my top 50, and I might move him up even again.
He filled in for CeeDee Lamb and Devontae Turpin as a slot primary pass catcher. So he should still keep that role.
Flournoy or Travis Hunter this week? Who do you like?
I mean, both.
Yeah. This is like
maybe I'll take the hires on both. I'm going to make, that's what I'm going to do. You ready?
I like this.
This is how you play it. Travis Hunter this week. Oh, come on. Typing fingers. By the way, Hayden, can you pull up the Sickos chart? Because I keep forgetting to ask about it each week, and we can finish out the show with it. Travis Hunter, higher, 36.5 receiving yards, which, by the way, just a 7.25 fantasy points, the higher or lower, like really is screaming to me and talking to me. I'm not going to go there. And then Ryan Flournoy, 35.5 receiving yards, higher for him as well. That's how we're going to do it. That's how we're going to play it. Use promo code the show, click the link in the description. Again, we're in 41 of 50 states now. So go and play in the dog app.
So fantasy defenses wise for week 6, I think it's a pretty clear cut options here. Packers against Joe Flacco, like that. You get the Broncos against Justin Fields, love that. The Rams against Cooper Rush with some rain, which might mean more fumbles and sacks and whatnot, like them. Steelers against Cleveland. No Jalen Ramsey there, but it still matters. And then Raiders, Colts, that type of tier. Chargers, kind of more just forcing some interceptions. Not that their defenses are so elite. The Chargers think's a good spot against the Dolphins without Tyreek Hill. So those would be the main ones. Everyone else is just you're praying. So I think it's pretty obvious. And unfortunately, this week Packers, Broncos, Rams, these defenses should have already been picked up. So you can't probably play them aside from DFS.
There it is. All right, everyone. We'll be back here on Saturday with quarterbacks and tight ends, basically a game preview show. So stick around, subscribe, leave a thumbs up. We'll talk to y'all then. See ya.